and your entire team knows exactly what this service entails. Historical data suggests that the customers will ask for the kind of changes that you have been hypothesizing. That is going to be a fact, a reality. In those cases, sure, you can. But without that, I doubt it. But now the question again is, and I'm going to conclude this ROI question with that, is we often look at return of investments on the effort and the money we are spending now. How do you quantify the potential gains of microservices in the long run? How do you quantify the fact that you can be 2 steps or 10 steps ahead of your customer in terms of your release velocity of features? How can you quantify fixing bugs and deploying client-specific requirements, right, which is double the speed as your next competitor? How will you quantify you becoming a market leader potentially with newer and better set of services and features, right, to your customers? How do you quantify all of that? That's part of return on investments too. So my point is, when you're looking at an approach like this, your challenge is going to be divided in 2 broad buckets: tangible and intangibles. The tangibles, again, broken down into your application and everything else that we talked about. Got that? So typical ROI calculation in my mind in here works about facts, which is 25% of the whole landscape, which is, I know that I need EC2 instances. I know the cost of load balancers. The remaining 75%, right, covers the application and the future benefits, etc., which I have no clue of. So how can we create a great ROI with just 25% of the information? That's why please start monolithic to begin with, try something out, and then you move on to the next phase. I don't know if I answered the question, but I thought, this is exactly what the reality is going to be. Okay.
If I may interject for a quick second, Nirmalya.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The other part of the question that was implied in there, hopefully, was as you start splitting it into microservices, this is real life. I mean, this is a live discussion we're currently having at one of my clients. Is that microservices demands an expansion of skill set in some format. You take a few people who understand the monolithic and you replace them with, or you replace the skills required with the ability to break it down into components and look at it from a different perspective. And the maintenance of that skill set and the improvement of that skill set is also a part of the ROI discussion. And that's something that we're not able to wrap our heads around very clearly. And that's never been, even in the old days, it's never been an easy business conversation. Right in today's world, that's a much more difficult conversation.
Actually, I read a very interesting and quite funny joke, and it is not new, it is old. The chief financial officer tells the CEO that, hey, we are investing all this money in getting their skills replaced. What if they leave? And the CEO responds to the CFO, what if we don't and they stay?
Yep. And that's exactly the problem we're having, which is, on the one side, in order to gain improvements, in order to fit the new model, sometimes it's whether we like it or not, we have to do it because competition is doing it, or because some of our collaborators, some of our partners are already there, and if we want to continue to work with them, we've got to change our operating model. All right, so that part of it is solved. Then what happens is, the question becomes, we're already operating on a slim margin. Now you're asking me to add on workforce. I can't get rid of my current workforce. I have to bring in some new blood in order to accommodate all these new requirements. Where am I going to find the money to fit this while maintaining my margin?
That's absolutely true. It's a difficult set, no doubt about that. If you're already on a thin margin and there's not enough cash at hand, then yes, bringing in a change is hard. I mean, that's not just in microservices, that's a general rule across the board,
And that's the
across
reason.
different kinds of services.
And that's the reason why. I mean, because I'm thinking about this problem from, just to go back to your first statement, which is how do we make this real life? A part of that question is this is a general reality for much of the manufacturing and a large part of the business world where the 45 plus component of the technology workforce is increasing in percentage numbers, and they're not as ready to accommodate these new technologies, not because they don't want to, but because the velocity of change is so fast that it's almost impossible for them. And how does business,
Absolutely.
and that's why Google and Facebook are able to, or LinkedIn are able to do better than most of the world. That's because their workforce by design is has an average, much lower average age. The larger part of the workforce, however, the larger part of the business world is not Facebook and Google. I mean, you got the Toyotas and you got the Fords and you got the insurance companies who don't have that kind of a workforce. So how do we sell there? That's a bigger question. So that's where my ROI question was from.
Got that. Yep, yep, absolutely. I think those are some hard realities where, I guess, the general answer that, you might come across is why not have a proof of concept done with a small, use case and present the outcome and and the benefits. Oops. Right, and the benefits, right? But the thing is, when we are looking at a small application or a small use case, and we, try to create a POC or do a POC and collect metrics, I really don't think it has that kind of an impact. The reason because the business user might see marginal improvements, if at all, right? Might say that, look, this particular use case, if you've done the typical monolithic manner, okay, it costed us like this, factoring in everything else, right? With the tangible, guesses. And by doing microservices, it's probably, in the long run, saving only this much. So what's the big deal? So the presentation or the pitch becomes, slightly on the weaker ground, and the risks of taking a heavy duty application is while you might get some good numbers, the total time taken for doing that proof of concept might be longer. And again, that can have diminished effects, whereby you, at the end of the day, you can decide that, nope, that particular use case is not a good fit for microservices, it's fine the way it is, right? Yeah, it is a catch-22 situation. I guess it also starts with not just doing skill replacement of the folks who are at the grassroots level, who actually do the implementation. But honestly speaking, and no offense meant, even the senior folks need to have their skills refreshed. They need to have the foresight to say that, yeah, if I don't do something like this in the in the near run, right? Yeah, we are going to have a little bit of a negative margin, but guess what? That's great for business sustainability perspective for the long run. If the business leaders don't have that mindset, then I think it doesn't matter. We can do whatever we like at the grassroots level. It's just not going to happen. So now the question is, how do we break it to them? And I
I
think that is where
I've got one
the
angle that
intellectual.
I've got one angle that I've been working on over the last 2 days that seems to
Yeah.
break ice a little better. I'll share that with
Okay.
you, which is in light of recent security situations. Well, I mean, Sunburst was only one part of it. There are many more. The SolarWinds issue. But to
Yeah.
say, hey, if we switch to microservices, it becomes easier to isolate and potentially block a component without impacting the rest of the business. We can work around, we can find a replacement for a single small component much quicker than we can retool an entire monolith. So it allows us to be a lot more nimble and a lot more flexible to change.
Yep, reducing the blast radius,
Yes.
absolutely. So yeah, if a scare tactic works, well, so be it.
Now, not just the scare tactic. I think what got a few eyes
Oh no, I
open
was just
was
kidding.
no. You're
Yeah.
not. Seriously, the scare tactics are required in order to get them to start listening. But the other part of it was that it allowed me to bring up the conversation to say, hey, it also allows us to become a lot more nimble and able to accommodate change much more rapidly.
Absolutely, absolutely, no questions about that. So I think every organization will have probably a slightly different approach. Every business user will have their own set of worries that they have to deal with for a variety of reasons, valid reasons, and we probably will have to work backwards from that and try and see how those can be applied and creating a value proposition which is very very specific and native to that organization so that the implementation actually goes through. Yep. All right. So let's come back to the other part in terms of trying to put all of these individual components together, right? To try and see how we can have synchronous communication, asynchronous communication, and obviously different set of services, etc. How can all of this be put together? So again, we've got the client, we've the client-facing load balancer, then these are the different services, and you can see that each of these services has the ability to communicate with other set of services, right, synchronously and asynchronously. And now the interesting fact here is how can I do parallel execution, based on a single event. So consider this. You see, there is a comment service right here, right? The moment somebody puts in a comment, right, on maybe somebody's article, some post, or whatever it is. So what it does is it goes out there and throws the fact that this user commented on that user's post, right, in let's say an SNS topic. And you can have multiple subscribers to that particular topic, and that can be queue. So one queue is capturing that message to figure out, oh, this user commented on the post by this user, but they don't seem to be connected.